Welcome to Reconnecting with Wholeness, the podcast where we dive deep into the messy, beautiful journey of coming home to yourself. I'm your host, Paige, and together we'll gently question everything, bringing you deeper into self-awareness, acceptance, and trust. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Hello. I am excited to talk to you guys today. This is something that's been on my mind and heart for a while, and it's popped up on some social media feeds, and it just feels good to talk about this today. So our theme is still season 1, Reconnection Starts With You. And today we're going to be talking about the brain. Reconnecting with the brain, which maybe doesn't sound the most fun, but I actually really love this stuff. I think it's so practical, and one of the things that I've been seeing a lot on social media is your brain lies to you, and I'm like, well, that's not really true. That's not really true. Kind of true, but not really true. It's a very nuanced thing, in my opinion. So people use it in social media in terms of like, your brain will tell you you're not good enough. Like, that's not true. And it's a part of the story, right? So we're going to kind of clear some things up today. We're going to talk about how does the brain actually work. So the brain actually works in a way that it filters in what you put into it. So the way that I talked about this to my husband the other day was, if you think about your brain as like a Google search engine, if you put in I'm not good enough, then it will filter through all of the ways that you're not good enough, and it will give you a nice little composed list of here's all of the evidence for that. So your brain is like this analyzer, and your brain ultimately is always trying to prove you right. That's what the brain does. At its core function, the brain is always trying to prove you right. It's not lying to you. It is really this like tool that's on our side that most of us don't actually know how to utilize, right? Now, the hard part, right, becomes if we take that same example of like, I'm not good enough. The I'm not good enough doesn't come from the brain. That comes from a belief that we hold. And until we can really change that belief, really change the input that we're giving it, then our brain is going to continue to show us the same things. This is where positive mindset alone, or like affirmations alone, really don't work. I'm not dogging affirmations. I'm not dogging positive mindset. I think it's great in its space. I think that it's great if you have somebody who's also going to talk about the nervous system, or how to shift those beliefs, or how to make sure that feels safe in our body. But what we try to do instead is we say, okay, well, like, I'm not good enough, and if that's not true, then like I am good enough, but that I am good enough doesn't feel safe in the body. It doesn't where we're trying to input something in that ultimately isn't lasting. So the way that I would kind of create like an analogy for this is, if I was Google searching, I'm not good enough, but I am good enough, right? Like we're sending mixed messages to the brain, and then it doesn't actually compute the way that we think it should. And so that like fundamental belief is really the thing that we need to change, so that way our brain can start showing us evidence for the things that we do want, right? So this is why abundance, for example. I feel like money mindset is talked about a lot. We use these types of affirmations. Maybe you don't use these types of affirmations all the time, but I see it a lot in the world that I am in, and people like on TikTok or other social media platforms, right, will give you affirmations, things to say every morning. And so that could be, I am worthy of money. Now somebody might be like, but I don't believe that I'm worthy of money, right? And so like, as long as your belief is what it is, then your brain will always show you how you're not worthy of money. This is why affirmations don't always work. The other thing is that even if you do get to a place where, say, the affirmation is, I'm worthy of money, you're like, okay, cool, I finally think that I'm worthy of money. If your brain doesn't actually feel that, like if your belief doesn't actually match up with that, then you'll receive more money, but you will spend it all, or you will give it away, or you will lose it, or something will happen. You'll get robbed. I'm not saying that we like all subconsciously create things that happen to us, but inevitably, like, something will happen. You'll still somehow be at like cash zero by the end of the week, even though your income has increased, because on a deeper belief meaning, like on a deeper belief level, you still feel like you're not worthy. And so until we can shift those beliefs, now sometimes we can sometimes shift those beliefs with just positive mindset. I don't even know why I said that, because I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that positive mindset alone is enough. We're going to talk about the nervous system next week, and part of that is because it's the nervous system. If your body isn't on board for whatever that belief is, then like the nervous system will hijack it. I look at the brain and the nervous system as kind of like this embodiment of like the masculine and feminine, where if to do the things that you want, to have the life that you want, to be the person you want, right? Like both of those have to be in union. They have to be on the same wavelength. And if the brain is not in agreement, typically it's from some of those like deep subconscious beliefs. If the brain isn't on board, then even if the nervous system is, it kind of like overrides, right? And the reverse is also true. And so if we shift a belief and the brain is on board, but the nervous system feels like it's not safe, then the nervous system hijacks and self-sabotages. So self-sabotage happens in two ways, at two places. And the idea is that we have to keep both of those on board. My analogy for this, not that you guys asked, but I'm a big analogy person, and trying to make things practical, is I'm a big believer in my own relationship that, you know, having a kid is a big deal. And so if I'm not on board or my husband's not on board, then the answer is no, right? And our body kind of does that same thing. Like if one of us isn't on board, then the answer is no, we're not doing that. And that can be true too for how you spend money, or that can be true for a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be children. So the goal for the brain is to change the beliefs and therefore changing that input, right? The brain, and I said this earlier, but the brain is always trying to prove you right. And so if your belief is nobody pays attention to me, I'm going to go here. I'm going to use a real example of my own. So I had this session with a woman, and we were unraveling beliefs. And so she kind of led, I think she calls them hypno meditations right now. But she led, it was a group thing, but she led us through a meditation. And the belief that came up for me was nobody pays attention to me. And I had this really beautiful moment in this meditation where I recognized that was the belief, and I reframed that belief and really rewrote it. And that's what we're looking to do, right? We're looking to rewrite those old beliefs. And the reason why this is important is because when we do this successfully, the brain starts giving you evidence right away. So we come out of the meditation and I share, and I was like, yeah, it's interesting. I had this thing and went back to this memory when I was a kid, and this was the situation, and the belief that formed was nobody pays attention to me. And I had explained in our little group thing how I had this moment of no, just because other people are afraid doesn't mean that you're in the wrong. You're brave, you keep doing what you're doing. This situation, maybe you wish people would have responded differently, but ultimately there was nothing wrong about this. So I say that because within literally, I don't know, so within 72 hours, I had different things that happened, or I had 3 different things. I have a Substack, and I was looking at my audience and realized that I have subscribers from 3 other countries, which was so exciting to me. And I was like, whoa, right? And that is people pay attention to me, right? This was already an example of how people are paying attention to me, right? I recognize that my Substack audience was, I don't have many subscribers, but in total with my followers, I think I have 30 people. And I made a post on Facebook about something completely unrelated, and it had I don't know, something ridiculous, 35 people who liked it. And I'm like, none of my posts ever get this much attention. And then I did a sound bath, and I had 10 people who showed up to that, right? And so in this very short time period, my brain showed me and latched on to all of these different ways that people do actually pay attention to me, that otherwise that stuff is still there. It's just that our brain kind of filters that out, right? Because that's not what it's showing that it's programmed for. Does that make sense? It's the phenomenon of, I really want this thing. People do this all the time with vehicles, right? I really want a blue truck, or I really want a, I don't know, Jeep. And then you start seeing Jeeps all around. They've always been there. It's just that now your brain is filtering through that lens and it's looking for it, right? And so you're noticing it more. And so the same thing happens in our daily lives and in our beliefs, right? Our brain, if our thinking is negative, if that's what we're looking for how people are bad, or how they abuse our trust, or how they use us, then that is what our brain will pick up on. That's what our brain will see, because it's finding evidence basically for you to prove your case. Whereas on the other hand, if you're wow, people are amazing and they do all sorts of kind things and I can really trust people, then your brain will see all of the ways that you can do that, and it highlights them. One of the best modalities, in my opinion, for belief shifting is tapping, emotional freedom technique. I use it. I know a lot of other people who use it. I excuse me. I talk about it in my living library. I go through like tapping scripts and things of that nature. It is, there's the tapping solution by Nick Ortner or something like that. There's a lot of people who do tapping, and I think one of the reasons why it's gained a lot of popularity is because it is so efficient. But part of how it works is it kind of like deflags those things for us. Our brain ultimately is like this giant highlighter, if you will, and it's there to help us perceive dangers and threats. And if we continue to see things as a threat, then our brain continues to filter through that. And I know that threat might feel like a very harsh word, but ultimately, like, that's the way that our brain in a lot of ways, for as much as it's kind of evolved, still functions off of this very basic, its job is to keep us alive. It's to keep us safe. And so the brain says, oh, like, there's a lion. And then our nervous system response kicks in, right? And so it's there to say, oh, I recognize this, right? And that works in a lot of different ways. I think we talk about it in the ways that it is negative, in the way that it works against us, right? In today's society, like, we just don't have the same amount of threats that we used to, right? We're not looking for, unless you like live out in the boondocks, the odds of you like running into a bear aren't super likely. I mean, I live in New Hampshire, and like, we do have bears up here, but like, I'm in a spot that's not likely to happen, right? I'm more likely to see a deer. In fact, we had a deer in our yard the other day. Foxes, skunks, raccoons, right? Like, none of those are threats to me, really. But our brain sees things, and if we feel like there's a danger associated, it kicks into that like nervous system response. And otherwise, the other kind of capability that it has, right, is to recognize like hunters and gatherers. If we just go back to that, right, like, gatherers looked for berries, right, which kinds were poisonous and which kinds weren't, and that gets filtered through. And if we look at it from terms of not just the things that are dangerous or poisonous to us, right, but like these are good for food, I think that's one side of our brain we don't really talk about, and ultimately that's what we're kind of trying to lean into here. If we can shift our beliefs, because we're not in a space where we're typically like in the wild trying to survive and trying to figure out like what berries we can and can't eat. And so the way that gets correlated to today is what things are poisonous, what things are going to hurt me, what things are detrimental to my safety, and that ends up being the thing that we more often lean into, as opposed to what are the things that are really good for me. And tapping, like it does that. It kind of like deflags the brain. And one of the ways that I explain it in my explanation of tapping in the Living Library, Embracing the Fullness that I have, is that your brain flags all of these things as dangers. And I think that this is the part where the brain is actually like really misunderstood, because what it's doing when it says, I'm not good enough and here are all of the ways that I'm not good enough, is it's actually trying to keep us alive. It's trying to say like, okay, like this, no bueno. So if we change it, then it'll be good enough, right? But that's not really like practical application. So back in the day, right, our brain used to say, okay, there's a tiger, I might die, I need to do something, right? Tigers equal threat. And the way that that looks today, because we're not really in a place where we have tigers just hanging around the United States unless they're like in captivity, right, is that our parent gets angry with us, and our very primitive part of our brain says, ooh, angry, I might die. Now, maybe logically we can say, well, mom was never going to kill me, right? It doesn't change the fact that like that's the way that our brain perceives it, right? It says, ooh, danger, angry mom equals bad. And then this on a subconscious level continues, and so every time we feel somebody, right, and sometimes it can be very specific to like, okay, when angry women, or when women get angry with me, I feel triggered. It goes back into that like original flagging, right? Our brain said, ooh, angry mom equals bad, right? Sometimes it's just angry equals bad, and so it could be gender neutral, right? It's just when somebody gets angry with me, it triggers a nervous system response for me. That's the brain doing its job in one of its most basic forms. And so what tapping does is it basically like deflags that as a danger. So that way when somebody gets angry with you, you don't see it as a threat to your safety. And you can just say, well, it's okay. They can be angry. That's their right. Or it's safe to speak my voice because I'm not actually going to get exiled from the community. We can, it applies to all sorts of parts of our life, but it really comes down to that like very fundamental, like the brain flags things and then proves us right for that. And so the brain really has like those two different functions. I'm going to say it doesn't necessarily assign a meaning to an event, but it does show us where that meaning re-shows up for us, right? So again, if we use the example of like, I'm not good enough in the beginning, right? Maybe what happened is a parent yelled at you, or a friend left, or a boyfriend broke up with you, or a girlfriend broke up with you, whatever, right? Whatever that thing is, you got an F on a quiz, right? And that was the event, and we, somewhere internally, a different component than the brain, says, this means I'm not good enough. And that belief kind of gets formed. And I say that belief gets reinforced, and it's kind of true. Like the brain reinforces that belief, but it reinforces that belief because that belief was fed into the brain, right? And so now that we have that like fundamental, ooh, I'm not good enough, it starts showing you all of the ways that you're not good enough, just as though it would show you every time that there's a tiger or a snake or whatever it is that might potentially harm you, right? Like our brain is looking for those dangers. And I do think that it is something important to think about, that like we have for a long time as just humans like lived in tribal type communities, right? Whether that's truly tribes or villages, and we've required belonging to a people for our survival for, I don't know, a really long time. And now we're in this like really crazy age where we have technology and we don't really have to do anything, and we don't have to appease everybody. We don't really have to worry about being exiled. And so that like not good enough is still typically there, but it's also not like, it's not necessary for survival in the same way that it used to be. But our brain still says like being accepted has to happen for survival. So when we get into tapping, and I'm mentioning this in part because I want to leave you guys, whether anybody does tapping or not, I want to leave you guys with something practical and not just like, here's how the brain works, the end. But when we get into tapping, it kind of like deflags that, right? And so it says, okay, it is safe for me to maybe be exiled to whatever, right? That at its core is kind of how it works from like a sciencey perspective, even though I didn't give a very sciencey explanation of that. But anyway, I feel like I've gone on too long and I've explained, like I've like re-talked some of these things. But ultimately, the brain is there to keep you safe, to keep you alive, and to prove you right. And when we understand that, we can start to hack it, right? And maybe hack isn't the right word, and at the same time I feel like it's the perfect word, because I feel like our brain in a lot of ways is kind of like a computer. And so we just like need to get in there and shift the programming, the belief, what we define as safety. And when we do that, then we can really have this whole different life that we maybe never even thought was imaginable, or we always like wanted to do, but somehow, we can't really explain why, but we never quite did the thing. And it's oftentimes because of this. It's because our brain feels as though that's gonna be something that's unsafe, it's gonna kill us, or it's something that we don't have enough evidence for it working out yet. And the really cool thing is when you actually get to a place of like shifting those beliefs and saying, okay, I'm looking for evidence, you also will start to see evidence around you that maybe you don't have that yet, but other people do. And where before that other people having that thing that you wanted created a, whether it's like a trigger or an activation or a frustration or anger, jealousy, right? Afterwards, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, here's proof that actually I can do this thing because this person did it. And so it changes how we relate to others as well, because if I'm trying to think of a really good example. Okay, so here's a good example. I've been really working on saying the things I want to say, activating my voice. And I can get into some like really deep rabbit holes, and kind of go a bit more than a lot of people can, and or maybe like go a bit deeper than what a lot of people do or want to. And I have been concerned about like how that's going to be received. And when Kendrick Lamar did the halftime show, I remember talking to a coach and healer of mine, and I was like, actually it was like really freeing, because there was this evidence now that like my brain said, okay, well, yeah, sure, some people didn't like his performance, but the people who didn't like his performance said like the same two things, right? Which is, wow, that halftime show sucked, or we want to be entertained, not educated. Like, that was pretty much the only negative feedback that he got. And then you had a whole lot of other people who were like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. Or, wow, like, here are all of the like ways that what he did like was so deep, and people have had all sorts of theories about it, and that was like this really big evidence for me moment, right, of like it's safe to like put your stuff out there, and the people who are gonna get it are gonna get it, and the people who won't will probably just be like, wow, she sucks, I just want to be entertained. It's like, okay, cool, go somewhere else for that then. And so that's what I mean in terms of like the way that we connect to the world around us can change when we start being able to like shift our thoughts and our beliefs really deeper. It's not just thoughts, but it's really like those beliefs, and then what, as a result of that, what our brain is looking for. So I don't have like a specific challenge for you. Belief shifting can't happen overnight, but typically if it does, it's because you're working with somebody like me who does that type of work. And if you're doing it on your own, then honestly, I would really recommend tapping as a modality. I think it's like one of the best, if you're going to try to like do it yourself, type of things. I think it's one of the best modalities. But I guess my like invitation to you would just be, look at how, be really conscious, be really aware of what your brain is showing you and how that reinforces what you already believe about yourself, right? And my caveat to that is there a reframe, right? Is there something that you can do that maybe isn't a whole belief shifting, right? Maybe that feels like it's a really big undertaking right now, but is there a way that you can say, okay, but actually, like I've never been here before. I've never done this thing. I've never, like, this is a new opportunity for me. And maybe that scares you, in which case, if it scares you, your brain's going to do the same thing it does. But our brain, it's showing us evidence of why we're right. And I know I've said that like 30 times, but if you can even one time just say, especially if it's like a belief that isn't serving you right now, especially if it's a belief that maybe is holding you back a little bit, right? How can you come in and say, I know that this thing is scary. I know that I've done this before and it's failed. I know I've like made posts before and nobody's seen it. I know that I have made grilled cheese and burned it before, but this time might be different. It might be different. can you do that and feel safe enough to actually move forward with whatever the action is? I use burnt grilled cheese because I do it all the time. And, you know, sometimes like the best thing too is just say, you know what, like I have burned grilled cheese before and maybe I will do it again. And maybe I'll do it again this time. And maybe I won't. Right? And so just kind of like allowing and opening up your brain to like other option. Like that would be my invitation for you. Don't, unless you like feel like you're ready to work with somebody on shifting beliefs, or you know what those beliefs are that you want shifted, then great, do those. If you're like, cool, I already know tapping, I'm familiar with it, I'm going to continue to implement that, great. If you want to start tapping, cool, do that. If you want to learn more about it, like I said, I do have tapping scripts and stuff in my living library, Embracing the Fullness. You're welcome to look into that. Or there's the Tapping Solution, which is an app you can download, and that does have a like annual fee. There's all sorts of like tapping videos on YouTube and stuff too. But maybe just be even a little bit gentler with yourself and with your brain and say, maybe there's a different outcome this time. And maybe that's enough. And maybe that's enough. And sometimes that's all you have to do, is just be a little gentler and at least start the process there. With that, all the love and blessings. Thanks for joining me today on Reconnecting with Wholeness. I invite you to take what resonated and explore how it shows up in your own life. Keep in mind, even the smallest shifts can spark transformation. If today's episode felt valuable for you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share it, leave a review, or connect with me on social media. Until next time, keep exploring, keep feeling, and keep reconnecting with the wholeness that's already within you. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.